Welcome to the Fordham Career Center. Join us as we explore the personal stories and career insights of our Fordham community. In each episode, we'll be connecting with students and alumni to hear about how they realized their career path and navigated the job search. We'll be taking you a level deeper, diving into pressing questions about all things career related and figuring out, where do we go from here? Welcome to another episode of Dear Ram, Where Do I Go From Here? My name is Allie, and I am your Assistant Director of Student Engagement at the Rose Hill Career Center. And I'm also your host, and my pronouns are she, her. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Slav Velkov to the podcast. Slav is a recent Fordham College of Lincoln Center alum with a degree in film and television and a minor in visual arts. And 3 fun facts about Slav to kick off the episode are that he didn't have a smartphone until right before college. Very impressive. He ran a charity t-shirt brand in high school, also very impressive. And he sold his first drawing at age 6 for $2. And of course, Slav, I want to introduce you and dive into these questions. But first, I need clarification as to what this drawing was and who bought it.
Yes, I think the drawing was like some Tom and Jerry ripoff or something. And as far as I remember, one of our neighbors bought it. So I had set up this whole exhibition with all the drawings I've done so far. And I put all the drawings on my bed, and we invited, neighbors and cousins and grandfathers and family to look at my stuff and buy some small pieces.
That's amazing. So you had a neighborhood yard sale specifically showcasing just your art.
Yes.
Amazing. I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that. Welcome to the episode. We're so excited to have you here. And I'm going to kick off today's episode the way I start all episodes, which is asking you, what is your macro bio or the story of your life up until now?
Yeah, so my micro bio is, I'm from Bulgaria. That's where I was born, and I lived up until I was 19, until I came to college. And, I've always been passionate about film and painting. And to be honest, nothing has really changed since I was a kid. I have the same goals as I had before. I want to make films and paint. It's just that over the years, I've consciously decided to do it more professionally, and have only grown from there. So that's really my bio in a nutshell. And for the past 5 years, I've been living here in the US, except for the pandemic, but that's a whole other thing.
Right, of course. The pandemic messed up everything for all of us, so understandable. But in addition to your artwork that you did as a kid, you also made a lot of films in your adolescence. So before coming to Fordham, while at Fordham, I should say, you majored in film and television, and I would love to kind of talk about that with you in a bit. But before coming to Fordham, you already had really impressive hands-on experience in the world of film. So could you tell us what sparked your interest in film? And could you also expand upon the different projects you worked on prior to coming to the US for college?
Yeah. Well, what sparked my interest in film was, again, I don't really know. I mean, I've always just been interested in film since I've been a kid. Maybe when I was 13, that's when I formally, consciously started thinking about, being a director and maybe a writer. And then I wrote my first feature screenplay when I was 14, 15. And then I made my first short film when I was 16 with one of my best friends. And I must say it was a struggle. It was really, I didn't know what I was doing. I was, a complete amateur. So my first experience was definitely the hardest one. It almost made me give up filmmaking. But that's when I realized I'm really passionate about it, because, no matter what happens, I'm going to continue pushing.
That's great. That's amazing. And so you obviously had a little bit of film experience when you were in Bulgaria. Then you come to Fordham, you major in film and television. And what were some courses and extracurricular activities that you took and participated in that further reaffirmed your passion and love for film?
Yeah. the first thing I did, one of my first memories here was signing up for the Fordham Filmmaking Club. And that was a great, space to meet people and to watch movies and get movie recommendations. Because as a filmmaker, I think as an artist in general, I've always been inspired basically by other people and experiences and by watching other people's films. That's how I get inspired. So the filmmaker provided that, and I eventually became more involved, and I became the vice president of the club. And so yeah, that's on the side of activities. In terms of classes, honestly, every class has really furthered my my passion for knowledge, for art. Not only film, I mean, obviously, like screenwriting, film and video one, film and video two, all those kinds of classes, but also philosophy, sacred texts of the Middle East, all those kinds of things have fueled my passion.
That's awesome. That's great. And is there a particular project, a film project or any other art or creative project that you worked on for a class that you're particularly proud of or is very memorable to you?
Yeah, I would say the two probably most memorable projects that I've worked on for a class were my first short film that I did called Easy. And that was memorable because, when I came here in the US, I didn't really know anybody. But by making that film, I met a lot of people, and I really felt, very inspired when I was making this film. I'm not saying that it's a great film or anything, but the process was great. And ultimately, it's really about the process. You got to enjoy the process. Otherwise, if you do it for the awards and stuff, it's not a good idea. And then the other project, it was my senior thesis, which I really enjoyed making because that was a painting. I spent a lot of time by myself, drawing, and I discovered a lot of things about myself. And then the exhibition, of course, which was great. It was like the climax of my Fordham experience. So it was those two projects are sort of a full circle. The beginning with my short film, and then the end, my senior thesis.
That's very exciting. And just for clarification on your senior thesis, so when I was reading through your resume, I saw that your thesis was linked out, and obviously it takes us to your website. So your senior thesis was not your website, but a particular piece on your website. Is that correct?
Yes. My senior thesis was a very large drawing.
A very large drawing. Okay. Awesome.
Yes.
I probably scrolled upon it. I was doing some very deep dive research on your website, which I must say is very impressive. It's great to see a place where you've dedicated, that you've dedicated to your film and artwork. And I'm curious, we always have students who ask about developing your personal brand and how you build that out. Can you tell us how you personally built up your personal brand and how you maintain it now with a website and as you continue to develop and advance in the professional world?
Yeah, I would say two things about developing your brand. The number one is consistency. I think, sitting down, thinking about, what colors are you going to use? What fonts are you going to use for your website? And is it all consistent and all that kind of stuff? But the other thing, which I think is the most important, and that's where I made a mistake, I think, before you start branding yourself and doing all that, I think you should really focus on your work, really becoming good at what you do. And I did my whole self-branding thing, like my website and all that, a little bit too early. I didn't have that much work. So it was a little difficult to create my own brand when I didn't have that much work. So my advice is definitely first focus on what you want to do, become good at it, and then worry about branding. But if you want to brand yourself, then be consistent. That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so it's funny because I feel like being proactive is always a piece of advice when you're telling people how to advance themselves professionally or build out their personal brand. But in this case, it's do not be proactively proactive or it will come to bite you. But
yeah, and because one of the things I want to mention is a lot of what I see and a lot of what I've noticed in my past, content and stuff, um, when you start branding early, you start promoting work that isn't good necessarily. And then I was promoting work that wasn't that good. And I think that's not very respectful to the audience, because you don't want to waste people's time. How many Instagram reels are you gonna promote about some mediocre drawing or something, which I've done. So definitely think about your work first.
No, that definitely, all of that, what you said definitely makes sense. And I think a huge part of your personal brand, at least from my perspective as a viewer of your website, is kind of the three guiding principles within which you can find your work. Could you kind of walk us through what those three guiding principles are for listeners who don't have access to your website right now? And how you chose those guiding principles and what they mean to you?
Yes, of course. Well, the first thing I would say is, my first guiding principles is vision. And that relates to what I was saying earlier. It's good to have something to say. It's good to know what you want to do, and know what you're truly passionate about. Not what is popular or whatever, but just know what you want to express, and that's what I want to do with my work. First and foremost, figure out what I want to say here, and is that honest, or am I, borrowing or trying to be cool or something. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is simplicity, which it translates to basically doing things as as efficiently as possible. When you look at great art and all that stuff, it's always very economic. It seems very simple. You want to get from point A to point B in the most sort of logical and least superfluous way. I think that's a mark of great art, which is very, very difficult to achieve. And I'm not going to say I've achieved that. Yes, the final thing, my final principle is creativity, which, creativity is a tricky word, I think, because as one of my professors, because I'm taking classes at the Art Students League, what he's saying is, creativity isn't necessarily, doing whatever, whatever comes to mind. Creativity is something that comes from discipline, from hard work. You gain freedom through exercise after exercise. And when you want to learn to play the piano, to want to play what you want, you first start with very simple exercise and stuff. So creativity, what I mean there is, breaking the rules, but not necessarily doing some random arbitrary stuff. Being intentional with breaking the rules and why I want to break them or not.
Right. I've actually never heard of that definition of creativity, but I think it makes a lot of sense, and I'll definitely be using that definition moving forward. And another thing, in addition to the three guiding principles that you mentioned on your website, is that you aspire to reveal a transcendent formal truth. I have to read this off of the sheet to make sure I get it right. A transcendent formal truth in all of your work. So how do you accomplish this, and why is that important to you?
Yes, that's a very good question. And first of all, I'll say that writing artist statements, it's always tricky. Putting things your ideas into words. But by that I mean, by no means I want to say that I personally can reveal some truth for people or something. I'm just a guy, just a human. So, but yes. So here's what I want to say. By transcendent formal truth, what I basically mean is showing that the world is beyond the human. I love humanism. I love anthropocentrism. They've led to great things, but they've also led to World War II. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to, with my art, I don't want to make the human the center, and sort of identify the human with the god. So I want to place my human in a larger structure, in a larger world, to show that we are part of forces that are greater than us. The idea that humans could be gods, that's definitely not a great idea. And sort of the antidote to that is to show through my work that, you know, we're part of a larger world that's connected, and that our actions have impact on other people, and we should consider that.
That's great. Beautifully said. I love it. And I want to rewind back a bit. I know we kind of started off by diving into your senior thesis, but I want to touch on, I know you've worked with a lot of notable companies during your time at Fordham, such as the Wall Street Journal, Lionsgate, HitLab, etc. How did you find these opportunities, and what important skills did you learn while a part of each of these experiences that you've carried into your current job?
Yeah, so to answer the first part of your question, the Wall Street Journal, I found, you know, online. I applied, you know, without knowing anybody or anything like that, just randomly. I found the opportunity on Handshake, just applied. And then, you know, they reached back to me. There was an interview, and then I got the job. And then for the other companies, I just knew people that knew people, and they recommended me. And of course, you know, I went through an interview process and all that stuff, but it was a little different. But I would say in terms of the interview process, advice I would give, and just in general applying to jobs, is I think hard skills are very important, and often more important than soft skills, because I can always say, you know, I talk with people very well, or I'm very proactive, but you know, at the end of the day, I think what a lot of companies are looking for are skills like, can you work in Adobe Premiere Pro? Can you work on Photoshop? Those kinds of specific things. So I think when it comes to interviewing and applying to jobs, definitely, you know, definitely show that you have learned certain hard skills. And then what important skills did I learn at these companies? Well, a lot of stuff. You know, I learned a lot of stuff. But the most important thing I learned from all my internship experience is brevity. You know, learning how to express yourself and do things as quickly and succinctly as possible, because one of the biggest issues that we face is time. You know, we constantly don't have enough time.
Oh yeah.
You know, even if you think about it in life in general, you know, we live and die, and that's it. We're not immortal, so we don't have time to learn and do everything. So that's what I learned: how to do your best at given a certain limited amount of time.
I think that's, yeah, brevity. I could definitely understand struggling with time. It's hard to manage so many things at once, and I'm sure that you currently and in the past have been an expert in juggling multiple tasks.
I mean, I wouldn't say an expert. I'm definitely not an expert, but I've learned a lot. And there's this saying, I don't know if you even include this in the podcast. There's this interesting saying about that sort of thing, which is, you know, if you give an infant a typewriter in 1,000 years, sooner or later it's going to write Hamlet by just banging on the keyboard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
So you gotta be focused and do all that.
Focused and brief. Got it. I love it. And I know that you were saying during the interview process, it was really important as a creative to focus on those hard skills that you gain in terms of Adobe and other platforms. Where did you kind of gain experience with those hard skills? Was that something you did independently? Was that a mix of independent pursuance and learning that in class?
Yes, it was definitely a mix.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I would say that when I was growing up, my father, he had a marketing company, and advertising and all that stuff. And I used to just spend a lot of time in his office. So he had like Photoshop and all that stuff. So I've always been interested in those, you know, programs and that software. Eventually, when I came to college, I took this on another level. You know, my classes were a good stepping stone. They introduced me to a lot of things, but then it's ultimately up to you. Like, you gotta make your own projects and just go on YouTube and learn all the specifics. So it's a mix.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, now more than ever in the digital age, you're able to learn new things right on the spot. I know that I was speaking with a previous podcast guest about the fact that as a Fordham student, everyone has free access to LinkedIn Learning through Handshake. And for anyone who doesn't know what LinkedIn Learning is, it's a ton of e-learning courses that LinkedIn provides that span from business-related courses to technology-related courses to creative courses. And I know they have a few like Adobe-specific courses on LinkedIn Learning. So there are constantly resources that you could access that could get you those skills so that you don't have to take a formal class or pay for a premium account. It's all right there and present. But I'm glad that you had that exposure. You said even from childhood, just being in your dad's marketing company, which is super cool. And I'm curious.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing to your question about what skills I learned, because I said, hard skills are important, and they are, especially for applying. But one of the things that one of my managers said when I finished my internship at Wall Street Journal is, you can know a lot about equipment and software and stuff, and that's great. But he said, ultimately the people that he saw that succeeded, specifically in journalism, but not only, were the ones that were good writers. So, it's good to have, hard skills, but it's also, good to think about those, more fundamental things like, structure, writing, how to tell a story and those kinds of, which I also think are hard skills to a certain extent, but they're not necessarily technology related. So I think there are two types of skills there.
No, absolutely. I mean, that kind of goes back to why we offer a core curriculum here at Fordham, right? Like having those liberal arts skills in terms of writing and critical thinking and problem solving. Those aren't particularly, like you said, hard skills, but they are important skills that are applicable spanning basically every industry and every job type. So thank you for bringing that up and interjecting with that, because I completely agree. And moving right along, I'd love to hear, I mean, I guess this entire podcast episode has been about advice that you have for filmmakers and creatives in general. But what advice would you have for a first-year student coming in who wants to know how they could start stepping in the right direction towards a successful career in film?
Yeah, that's a good question. First, I would say, take my advice with a grain of salt, because I'm yet to have a successful career in film. I'm not there yet. But what I would say to
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just have to interject. I would argue that you do have quite a successful career in film, because if I understand this correctly, you have an award-winning film, right? That you created when you were 16?
Yes, that is true. Yes, I do. I've won awards, but I guess personally, I don't feel like I am where I want to be, not necessarily in terms of awards, but in terms of the quality of my work. So I'm still young. That's what I'm saying. I'm still young.
Understandable. I got you.
Yeah.
Just wanted to give credit where it's due.
Yeah, thank you. But what I would say is just invent work, just think of films, think of ideas, short films, make 4 or 5 short films, see what it's like, shoot it, direct it, edit it, and then see if you like the process, because the process is really where 90% of your time in this job is going to be. So see if you like the whole process. And yeah, that's my advice. And then watch a ton of movies. One of the ways you get inspired is by watching movies. Just watch movies, and in general have good experiences, go out, meet people. Of course, that's not always possible, because you still gotta do your homework.
Of course.
But watch a lot of movies, make a lot of short films, simple, keep it simple, and then submit to festivals. I mean, that's my advice. And if you are an American, you have American citizenship, you can stay here, you don't have to worry too much about rushing your career or something like that. So yeah.
Yeah, actually, I'd love to ask you a little bit more about that. I know prior to starting the recording of this podcast, you clarified that you are here in the US until next June, and then you'll kind of see where you go from there. How did you navigate the internship and now job search as an international student? What has that been like for you?
I don't know if my process was different than if I was not in. I mean, I still go on LinkedIn and all those websites, apply like everybody else. I still try to see who I know that who can help me, and see where I can be helpful to other people. So I guess my process would be similar
Mm,
to someone who's a US citizen. But I guess the difference is that it's just, again, going back to time. The difference is time. I have less time. So I have to uh, you know, be more productive, be more proactive before my visa expires, so that I can work as much as I can before that happens.
I see. And generally, what has that productivity looked like for you? Because I know that currently you're freelancing. Have you been looking for other jobs within the upcoming year? I guess to keep you here, like, do you have a set job plan, or have you just kind of been looking around here and there on LinkedIn and Handshake and other job platforms?
Yeah, I mean, besides freelancing, generally for people I've met throughout my time here and have some established relationships with, uh, um, besides that, I'm working on a few of my short films where, generally speaking, if you win an award or like a prestigious award, it's much easier to get a visa and all that stuff. But other than that, I'm just every day applying. Every day I wake up and I apply to jobs. It's law. I just sit down and I apply.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I know a lot of students who come in and they want to know how to start their job search. And I always say, just get 1 to 2 out a day, 1 to 2 applications out the door, and you'll feel so much better. And it shows that you're making progress
Yeah,
and holding
yeah.
yourself accountable for at least getting a few applications out a day. So that sounds great. And then my final question here to wrap up our time together is, where do you see yourself going from here? What are the long-term goals? I know it's everyone's least favorite question. It's almost like you're in an interview.
Yeah, no, I just wanna, because when you say something in public, it's like you make a promise. So I want to be careful about what I say. Yes, so I have 3 goals. Goal number 1 is actually becoming good at what I do. I understand that at this stage of my life, I can become some master, at the age of 23, 4, 5, obviously, but I can at least become good at what I do. So that's goal number 1. Goal number 2 is becoming financially independent. And goal number 3 is to just eventually make great art, art that engages, but also enlightens people in some way.
That's great. That's amazing. Well, we're all super excited here to see the engaging and enlightening art that you produce out into the world. And I want to give you an opportunity to kind of shout out your website for people who want to check it out and maybe want to connect with you and ask other questions about the creative field. Would you feel comfortable sharing that with the crowd?
Yeah, 100%. My website is like my name. So like slavvelkov.com, SlavVelkov.com. And then my Instagram is @slav.velkov.
Perfect. That's great. And on LinkedIn, are you Slav Velkov as well for people to connect with you?
Yes, pretty much. It's Slav B Velkov.
Slav B Velkov. Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
Yeah.
Great. Well, to any of the listeners out there who want to connect with Slav, please do so via his website, via LinkedIn. And thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you.
No, thank you for the invite. It's been a pleasure, and it's always good to talk about my goals and all that stuff, because it sort of clarifies everything in my head. So thank you very much for this.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. If you're interested in learning more about the Fordham Career Center, check us out on social media at Fordham Careers. Want advice on how to craft the best resume and score the job or internship of your dreams? Log into Handshake and schedule an appointment with one of our career counselors. We look forward to helping you figure out where to go from here.